All right, welcome back here on the program here on Sports Radio 810 WHB as we broadcast here at Hen House. A wonderful place for you to get ready for a big 3-day weekend. If you're having a cookout, start it at Hen House. Always great specials back in the butcher block, like the KC strip steaks. Yes, USDA Choice Certified Hereford beef, raised in our very own backyard right out by Dodge City, Kansas, where the finest beef in the world is raised. 10 ounces for those KC strips, just $9, or choose your own size for $13.99. You can see all the specials online right now at henhouse.com. Hen House, Kansas City's market since 1923. As we said, a chance to talk some college athletics. The athletic director for the Kansas Jayhawks is with us right now, Travis Goff. Travis, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Soren. Thanks for letting me swing by.
I appreciate it, and it's great to get a chance to talk to you. And kind of busy right now, I would think. Not everybody, has one of the iconic blue blood basketball programs to watch over, a football program that's in the top 25, and then you're completely rebuilding a football stadium. You're coming through renovations of the whole football complex. You're renovating the most historic basketball facility in the country. Busy days. And it's not just a football stadium, by the way. It's the Gateway District.
Right.
Do true justice to the scope of the project. Little busy these days?
I'm breaking a sweat just you laying it out there, Soren, and it's not because of the heat outside. No, it's kind of incredible to think about. We just walked through Allen with one of our great donors and supporters, and we were talking about just how special and how perfect it is, quite frankly, to think about opening a revitalized, replenished, renewed Allen Fieldhouse in 24-25, which we'll do in October, on October 18th with late night in the fog. And then just 10 months later-ish, about 10 months later, to then open up what's a mega phase one. I mean, it's hard to call it phase one. It's phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, quite frankly, of the Gateway District and the new David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium and the expanded Anderson Family Football Complex. But the timing of, bam, let's celebrate Allen this year. 70 years of Allen Fieldhouse, and we can't wait to showcase that facility that will be better than it's ever been, which is quite a statement. And then just, again, a short handful of months down the road, 2025, celebrating a game changer right there in Lawrence with a built from the ground up, new West, new North, Conference Center, Anderson, and an experience our fans have never had in any of our venues, that's for sure.
How delicate, let's start with Allen Fieldhouse. How delicate do you have to tread when you've got something that is so hallowed? And I'm sure there's, a lot of your fans, some of your big boosters that are like, listen, whoa, what are we doing here? Like, we love Allen Fieldhouse. Does that make the project more difficult? Or once you start showing the ideas, does it make it an easier sell? Wow, we get Allen even better.
I think, you go back to who is being asked to make some of the decisions around Allen or to show what some of the scenarios could be. And I got to give a ton of credit to our architects, quite frankly, in particular John Wilkins with Multi-Studio. Wilkins is a KU alum, School of Architecture, lives in Lawrence, is engaged with our campus master plan and facilities work, and has been for years and years and years, was involved in the previous major Allen renovation. So we have the professionals who not just know about architecture, but they know about what heritage, history, tradition means with Allen Fieldhouse in particular. So they've mitigated our ability to screw it up in a lot of ways. And then, hey, I'll give myself about a sliver of credit here. I grew up going to Allen as a kid, right, making a drive 4.5 hours from Dodge City, experienced that thing. It wasn't about bells and whistles. It wasn't about restrooms and concessions and the best video board. It was about hallowed ground, right? And so I have, I think, maybe a unique lens around that, and our staff embraces it. And Bill Self, same story, right? He gets that as much as anybody, and he's been a co-architect in a lot of ways of making sure we get that project right.
I don't know that Bill Self needs any more compliments, right? As one of the most successful and accomplished basketball coaches of all time. And I think here locally we understand how much he seems to get it off the basketball court as well. But how much does it help when you have some? I mean, he could be a giant spoiled brat if he wanted to and make your job and make everyone's job around him. But everyone I talk to, it seems like Bill Self is the best guy to work with. How much easier does that make your job? And how much of an asset is he in going and talking to the boosters and the alums and making it easier? I don't want to make it
sure.
like asking somebody for millions of dollars is is just some layup or something. But how much does it help to have him?
Well, I mean, if you look back since his arrival, and there's been a lot of great moments, obviously for KU and certainly basketball year in and year out, but other aspects of the institution. And there were some good football years in there, but there's also been some bumps and some challenges. Bill's been the consistent, steady beacon of excellence, I would describe, like the highest bar of excellence. And he's also been that really steadying, confidence-building, relational person for the department, right? There's just a connectivity that Bill has with people that's really different, very unique. And the way he's, in a lot of ways, carried, and that basketball program has carried us up, still continues to be at the forefront of it, but with now a lot of other right there, with them along that side, and currently certainly with Lance Leipold in football. That's been pretty special, and Bill's a great partner. He thinks beyond basketball. How do we make sure we're impacting the university? He's a top cheerleader for this football thing, so when he's not just talking about the importance of football, but making sure he's finding some ways to help demonstrate, value for building this football program, supporting Lance and the team, that's as real as it gets.
Yeah, you tweeted out a photo of Bill Self and Lance Leipold at the football field, and I don't remember your caption, but it was just, that had to be a fun photo to look at, to know, because to transition to the football side. As I said this to you a couple of years ago, I think after his first year, you feel pretty good about that hire, right? He hadn't had the bowl games yet, but even in that first season, you could see it. Now you've had a couple of years of success. How much does Lance Leipold like a Bill Self over on the football side?
Well, I've been known every once in a while to speak with hyperbole. I guess sometimes that's the job, but sometimes that's just my nature. And I think what we put out there was basically saying there's no better duo of men's basketball and football coach in the country when you take the two of them into account. And I don't think it's hyperbole. I think you'd have a tough time, frankly, debating that. And so we just speak the truth. We've got the best package in the country in Bill and Lance. And, again, they're great partners. They do have some similarities, certainly. I mean, you think about Bill and his roots and growing up in Oklahoma, right? Kind of a small town Oklahoma guy. And you think about Lance and his roots, small town Wisconsin, middle of America type thing in some humble beginnings, I think, in both cases. I think that shines through in terms of how they both work to represent university, our fan base, and the ways in which they've built and then obviously sustained excellence in their tenures.
Are you confident? Bill Self has a lifetime contract. I mean, there were times I've covered times where it felt like, is Oklahoma State, is T. Boone Pickens going to get him? Is the NBA, is his buddy at the Spurs going to take him away? It seems like we've come through that, and this is Bill's permanent home, and whenever he leaves Kansas, it'll be to retire, not to go someplace else. Lance Leipold's name's come up a couple of times. You guys have been able to rework his contract a number of different times.
Right.
Is there a fear? I asked a question once about, is there a number that you just can't get to? I mean, with the money that's going into the SEC, that's going into the Big Ten, the coaching salaries just seem to be skyrocketing. Do you worry that there's a number that he could be offered from in Alabama? They just got a new coach, so let's use that. They're not hiring anybody right now. But if one of the quote-unquote football blue bloods came in with an offer, $10 million, $11 million, $12 million, is there a point where you have to say, we're out?
Well, I mean, I think in both cases, like you're talking about Bill and you're talking about Lance, either of them could be making quite a bit more money elsewhere. I mean, I just think it's that straightforward. Bill, if he took the NBA jump, Bill, if he'd taken one of many of the collegiate jobs that have tried to approach him, he'd be making more than he's making at Kansas. Now, he's obviously being compensated incredibly well at KU, and that was the contract just about a year ago, not quite a year ago, that we rolled out that I think is as competitive as anything in that marketplace. But there's always more. You can always go and get more, especially the way the market forces work. In the case of Lance, even though, again, we've put together, it's really three, but I'd just call it two incredibly competitive packages. And in both cases for them, it's not just about their compensation. It is about their staff, the support staff. How are we not just compensating them fairly, competitively, but how are we making sure we're retaining the totality of what makes those coaches and those staffs so incredibly outstanding. So the money dynamic, there's always more out there. In both cases, Lance and Bill aren't staying because that being primary one, right? I think it's one of a number of things. We've got the investment in facilities. We've been competitive in the NIL space, right? We're not one in the NIL space. We're competitive in both programs in the NIL space. And I think as long as they can continue to feel like the totality of support, momentum, investment, this is the right place. And they've both proven it with great loyalty and continued commitment to KU.
You've been around athletics for a while. How underrated is the being able to have your people around you, right? Bill has his staff, Lance has had his staff, having the resources to keep the kind of people you want around you, the facilities, all those things behind. Is that an underrated part of, like, it's not just, well, this coach is getting $7 million, this one's getting $6 million.
Yeah.
Like, can you put a dollar value on it? Well, that's worth about $3 million of coach's salary to have all of these other things that are there.
You probably can't because it's priceless. I mean, I think it exceeds the literal dollar amounts. So that to me is the foundation that the whole thing's built upon. You know, there's been a narrative out there the last couple years that NIL is the most important thing. And I don't know that I would debate that passionately. I would say it's one of many things. But let me put it in a different terms. If you didn't have institutional alignment, if you didn't have support for your staff, if you didn't have the right kinds of facilities to attract and then develop your student athletes, if you didn't have fan support and on and on and on, it doesn't matter how much money you have in NIL. You're not in the game. So if you better have that really incredibly solid, strong foundation. NIL, this ends up becoming this additional supplemental part of rounding out what it takes these days. So that's, I think, the way we've thought about it, and we've had cracks in the foundation, right? So that means we better tackle David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium with great ambition. We better not sit idle on the mecca of college basketball, because then we're starting to show weaknesses, and we're trying to make up for deficiencies that we can ill afford at this point.
We're talking to Travis Goff, athletic director for the Kansas Jayhawks. You mentioned the stadium project, the Gateway District. I saw some interviews with you back in May. It seemed like things were on schedule. You wouldn't say they were ahead of schedule, but they were on schedule. It's only a few months later, but how do we sit right now? Still on schedule? Are we ahead of schedule, behind? How do we look?
Still on schedule and still on budget. And I'm knocking on your studio wood grain here, because we can't take either of them for granted. But, here we are approaching September, and we're under now the 12-month window to open. We're going to play week 0 next year against Fresno State. I think it's August 23rd to open the new booth and the Gateway District. And that means we're more like 11 months than we are 12 months. But on schedule, on budget, the team, Turner Construction, you name it, the subs, aligned, working incredibly hard, double shifts. I mean, you name it, we're throwing everything at it. But all indicators, absolutely, we're going to be opening and celebrating this thing in less than a year.
How about on schedule as far as funding goes for it? Because I know that's a lot of money. I think it was a $450 million project. That's not just...
Yep.
If you can find the guy that can write that check, let him know. I've got a couple of bills he could swing as well.
You and everybody else, right? No doubt. I don't think that exists, at least in my experience.
How is the funding going? Is everything on track there?
Yeah, and I'll break it down for you. So $450 million project. We've got borrowing capabilities out of athletics, so we're borrowing. University's not borrowing. We'll borrow roughly $115 million. Okay, new debt service line, but we're driving new revenues that far exceed the cost of that borrowing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Soren, so that's a 115 mark. We had pretty well documented, as far as I can gather. I know there's been some storylines around it. We had about a $35 million infrastructure investment through the state, and then ARPA funds, which are federal support COVID economic relief dollars that filtered through the states. That was to the tune of up to $50 million if we could go match it 3-1. So that's equating to another 85. So I got 115 in borrowing, 85 through those mechanisms, and then the rest of it's philanthropic fundraising and premium sales for the project. That total ends up being 250. So I'm putting this as clearly as I think I've ever articulated it. 250. We're approaching $200 million in private dollars raised for the project, and that's still with some significant runway on premium sales, all leading up to the opening, and a number of incredibly exciting conversations with some additional leadership donors. So the short answer is we still got some work to do, and we need our donors to continue to step up and be part of this thing. The other part of the answer is we've got outstanding confidence that we're going to hit that mark, because what we need to do is then create momentum and a bridge to tackling phase 2, east side, broader development over there, and we're closing in on signatures on a partnership and an agreement with a developer to help make that all come to fruition.
That's a lot of dollars, right?
Yep.
And you're a long way down towards it. But to hear you talk about the other side of the stadium, the other side of the field, there's
right.
more dollars even after this, right? To do the whole scope of the project. You mentioned this is going to generate more revenue, right? You're going to have more luxury seats, more suites, better amenities that people will be hopefully very eager to spend even more money and have a better game day experience. Corporate, I mean, do we get to naming rights? Are we there? I mean, because there's been talk, Brett Yormark's talked about putting sponsors on jerseys, all those kind of things. Is that coming to college athletics?
Yeah, you've probably heard Brett Yormark say the Big 12's open for business.
Right.
Kansas Athletics is open for business. Let's put it that way, because it's not just funding these projects, it's also funding what I know, Soren, you're up to speed on, which is this house settlement and the likely proposition that we're going to need to share revenues directly with student athletes in conceivably a year from now. So we've got to find new revenue streams to help make sure we can be competitive in the rev share space. So, for example, and this has been stated out there, not that profound, but we need to have the right partners' corporate logo on the field at David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium. We've got Naismith Court inside Allen Fieldhouse. It will forever be Naismith Court.
Right.
And it will forever be Allen Fieldhouse. That doesn't mean we couldn't put a corporate logo on Naismith Court. Doesn't change the name. It just means we're putting eyeballs and elevating a brand and a partner that thereby can help move our needle, obviously, in this new era of college athletics.
You mentioned the part about the house. I think I've talked to you about this before. Do we really need, if the NCAA, aren't they the governing body, why can't everybody get together? Why can't all the members get together and come to a conclusion? Why do we need government to step in and solve it? Is it just, it's outgrown, the universities have outgrown the administrative board that is the NCAA, and
yeah, I think you could make that. I think you could make that statement in some part. I will say though that this house settlement ultimately ends up being us, in particular, Power 4 conferences, commissioners, general counsels, presidents, athletic directors, coming together to agree that settlement is better than the alternative of that case going to court, and the risk of that case going to court and coming on the wrong side of that. So the house settlement is to manage something that conceivably is manageable, even though incredibly lofty and challenging. So $2.7 billion in retro damages to student athletes who competed previously to this chapter of college athletics, and then the ability to share upwards of $21 million roughly in new revenues direct with the future generations of student athletes at our places. That's what's in front of us.
Are we going to see a union? Players, if people don't, I'm talking about a players union, an athletes union.
You start to see some of that, especially in the private settings. When you get into the state and public institutions, there's a whole nother realm around that. Starts to become, I think, more challenging as I understand it. I'm not smart enough and not a lawyer, but I think as I understand it, starts to become more challenging to extrapolate that across different states and public institutions.
Right.
But you'll see that, Dartmouth is one right now where there's some unionization efforts with men's basketball, and as a private, they can kind of tackle their realm in that space, but it doesn't mean it spills down to all the public institutions.
Or spills up, let's be honest.
Yeah, spills up.
Dartmouth, not exactly what we thought would be on the front line of that conversation.
Right.
There's also a lawsuit going on in North Carolina. I think it's a mother is suing about her son in high school not being able to get NIL money because they're banning. I think it's from Tennessee. I vaguely read it, so I'm not doing service to the totality of what's going on. But basically, they want it to be down to the high school level, right? We also know that there's a law in Missouri that you can be paid NILs in the state of Missouri if you sign on to go to a Missouri school.
Right.
Will this bill, does this solve all that, or are we going to state by state be?
Yeah,
because that's really what kind of blew this all up was when, different states started going, well, forget about that NCAA rule. In this state, it's going to be like this. Are we going to get something that encompasses all of that?
That's a really good point, because the states have found some workarounds. The universities or athletic directors or whomever have lobbied to create some workarounds to this notion that there's some guardrails around this thing, and you've used a couple examples there. One of the things we need beyond what the NCAA can do is some protections from Congress that make sure that the new, in this case, the House settlement and the enforcement mechanisms around it preempt state law, if that makes sense. And again, this is a little bit over my head too, but we've got to find a way to have some preemptions that ensure we're all playing by. They're not going to be all the same, right? Because not everybody, by the way, can afford $21 million out of the gates. And then, of course, there's going to continue to be some competitive imbalance, as there should be, quite honestly. But at least to tackle and address the notion that each and every state could be creating workarounds that negates trying to do something in totality. So that's one of the protections that we need out in front of us.
Why will it make it better for the athletes and maybe college athletics as a whole for the money to be coming through the schools directly to because now it's this little it's got to be a separate group out here.
The collective kind of concept.
The collective type of thing. Why does it get better? Yeah, because there's some feeling that, maybe the coaches controlling everything. The coaches kind of ruled the team with an iron fist. You couldn't transfer unless I said you could, all that. And maybe some freedom has been given to the athletes. Why would it be better to put all that control back in the hands of the university and thereby largely in the hands of coaches?
I think in a lot of ways it creates some transparency that is sorely missed in this NIL collective environment. You don't know what's what. You don't know what's real. The rumor mill or social media will tell you everybody's spending millions and millions and millions and millions putting together rosters. So I think some transparency components to it. I think some integrity components to it as well, Soren. I think let's just use the notion of what the intent of commercial NIL is, right? In the settlement, it says you can share revenues out of your own coffers, that up to $21 million. It also says that student athletes still have every ability to secure commercial NIL, which means a business entity or a nonprofit entity that is asking a quid pro quo to whatever extent of the student athletes to provide a service for that entity to demonstrate value, right? A real marketing deal, in short words. It also, in the settlement, says it should hit a fair market value standard. So there's going to be an entity that's going to help put some controls around what fair market value is. I don't know that anybody.
How do you find a fair market value in a free market society?
Yeah, they've got some concepts. It's early, and I don't think any of us have grasped that yet because we haven't seen the full playbook. But they've got some concepts around how they think they can establish that in a fair manner, right? A manner that can meet the market dynamics. I don't think anybody loves this notion that a student athlete could show up to a birthday party and get $1 million check. I mean, we all want our student athletes to get every piece of what they can get. No question. They deserve it. What they're doing for our institutions is unbelievable. Driving enrollment, driving alumni engagement and fundraising, helping build buildings, quite frankly, making sure whether it be athletic directors or head coaches are in some ways overcompensated. Like, this is absolutely the right thing. But can we put some parameters, not restrain, not by any means restrain, but can we put some parameters? And I think that's the intent with this thing.
I think there'd be people on the player side that say if someone's willing to give them $1 million to show up at a birthday party, it's worth $1 million, right? I mean, I'm with you. I hear you. It does.
And that's very fair. And again, that's where the settlement addresses some of those dynamics. That becomes in the purpose of the settlement. And we'll see how it all holds. Right. They're taking objections as we speak, and ultimately a judge decides. Like, it isn't all said and done. But the purpose of the settlement says, well, that's not commercial NIL, so you can't do that.
Right.
Commercial NIL is what I tried to describe here a minute or two ago.
And then that's obviously that's just a rich guy wanting a favor.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And listen, if he wants to give his money, it's great, but if you're going to be part of a group over here that does this, these are the rules we have.
Right.
I think that's what everybody wants, are rules that say, okay, we've at least got a playing field that everybody can play on.
Yeah.
You're going to play all your football games this year in Children's Mercy Park where Sporting plays and at Arrowhead where the Chiefs play. First of all, how's that going? How is it being met by your fans? How are the ticket sales going for those games?
Well, we knew Children's Mercy was going to be easy, right? I mean, just by only affording an opportunity to season ticket holders and then students, we've had to condense that a little bit. We've seen what these student sections can be these last couple years at our place, spill over and moving into the North Bowl, moving toward the small slither of visitors has been awesome to see. So we've had to squeeze the student piece a little bit. Season ticket holders, the only people that have had access, no single game tickets. And then, of course, some room for the visitors, some room for the marching band. So CMP will be standing room only, wonderful madhouse. And that's, as we all know, that's an incredible venue. Mm-hmm. And even though there'll be 21,000 people in there, it's going to feel like there's 55,000 people in there.
I mean, Arrowhead's historic and playing there is great, but I think being able to say you were there is going to be one of the great badges of honor of KU fandom.
Under the lights, all those kind of fireworks and after every score.
The Chiefs playing out in L.A. when the Chargers were playing in the soccer stadium out there was an amazing venue, and I know everybody who went out there said they loved it. Yeah. So I can only imagine what KU fans are going to do right down the road from where they are, and for many of them right down the road from home.
No doubt.
And then being able to see Kansas, I think that's a slam dunk.
Yep.
Arrowhead, to me, seems obviously a little bit more challenging because it's bigger to create the environment, but also like the Iowa State game to me is one that looms out there. I mean, those people travel, they're great fans, and they love to come to Kansas City.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so do you worry about that being a 50-50 game?
Well, I don't know if worry is the right phrase. I think we're strategic about it. Let me just put it that way. We're being strategic about. I'll just give some examples. So we've had obviously the season ticket plan for everybody who can get 6 games, and again that's limited because you can only get so many in CMP. Then we've had a 4-game Arrowhead package. So those have been open to the masses, to the public, so to speak, for some time now. The sales have been outstanding. Really feel good about the trajectory. We aren't on sale for single-game tickets. And, I think we're all smart enough and honest enough to be a little bit open as to why. We want our Jayhawks, in particular, Kansas City Metro Jayhawks, to have had more than ample time, to have had more than ample information, and to have stepped up to the challenge and to the plate to make sure when we get into those Arrowhead conference games, there's no question about who the home team is. And we feel exceptional confidence that that's what it'll be for 3 of them. And I think you make the good point. Yeah, Iowa State fans are outstanding. They love this market, and it's close, and they're accustomed to March in the Big 12 basketball tournaments and all those other things. So just being strategic around it, not trying to box anybody out, but at the end of the day, our responsibility is to Jayhawk fans and to the young men that are out there representing our place at our home venue. And so at the right time, we'll broaden it, but it won't be until I feel like we've given every opportunity to Jayhawks, especially Kansas City Metro Jayhawks, to jump on board with the 4-game package and or to have earned their way into single games that aren't open to the public. And that's kind of one of the things we're working through right now.
We're talking to Travis Goff here on the program. I want to ask you one other thing that's conference-wide, and that is there are reports out there that UConn is being entertained as a possibility to come in immediately with all their sports except football, or I think in 26, come in with all their sports except for football. Football would then come in 2031, be the 17th member. Doesn't seem like this is a slam dunk or done, but we've heard this report for a couple of years now. It seems the commissioner, Brett Yormark, is very much. He's been linked to conversations that have been on. In your mind, where does it stand? What can you say about UConn being a 17th member of the Big 12?
Well, I mean, the short answer is I can't say a lot, and it's not because I wouldn't love to sit here and open the playbook. I try to do that as much as possible. In this case, you can't say a lot. Certainly, you can't say a lot about specific schools or institutions. I think that the reality is there's been consistency under Brett Yormark that we've all largely bought into, right? Vast majority of situations we've said, yes, we want to operate with an open-mindedness about what future progressiveness looks like, future growth could look like, which is not just in the forms of expansion. There's a lot of elements that need to grow in our league from a business perspective and revenue and all those other dynamics. So I think this is just another example of the ways in which the league is showing a progressive lens, and one that isn't fixed. It doesn't sit idle. And we need to look at, I mean, Brett says it all the time, optionality, right? No one's forcing or thrusting things upon the league, so to speak, or the presidents or the athletic directors, but what kind of optionality, what kind of things can we consider in a space in collegiate athletics that is evolving all the time? No one should be sitting idle. And I hate to say this, but nobody feels great about the way the Pac-12 ended up, right? That's an awful thing. What a proud league! What an exceptional batch of schools out west, and long traditions and all those things. But we all should have and have learned some things from that, right? If you rest on laurels, if you get too caught up in the notion of traditions or geography, and I'm not accusing them of all those things. I'm just saying conceptually that's some of the stuff that people might say. Then things can pass you by. And, the Big 12's a great lead, an outstanding league. It's got a really bright future we're excited about. But from a financial perspective, it isn't the Big 10 and the SEC. So who are we to just sit back and be comfortable? And so I think that's this whole dialogue that's out there going into the weekend over the last couple of days is just reflective of that kind of mindset.
All right, one more I want to ask you about Deion Sanders. Has said no to talking to a reporter in Colorado, and it's in his contract. I actually have, he's a state employee, so you can get his contract. You know how that works. That he gets that there's a mutual agreement about who can ask him questions. Does that shock you, being a guy who puts these kind of contracts together? Is that where we're going with things?
Good question. I mean, that's a little foreign to me. I guess our mindset, like when we do our contracts, it kind of says you engage with the media, whomever they are. You're going to like some of them. You're going to have some issues with some of them. Some are going to, rub you the wrong way. And, all coaches have their moments.
Sure.
Like our folks do that too, right?
Sure.
Where they're like, oh, my gosh, here this one is again. And look at this question. And they are on the attack and they're out to get me. We all have moments where nobody loves that part of it. But I do think, by and large, you sign up for it in some way, shape, or form. You hope it can stay on the right side of the ledger where it doesn't have to get to that kind of really volatile place. I don't think any of us are mocking or celebrating the dynamics in Denver and Boulder, but at the same time, that there can be some challenges that comes from that kind of profile. And Coach Prime is really good for our league, and I think is really good for Colorado. But certainly, has a high stature and profile and personality that is a little bit unique from most of the rest of the coaches in the conference.
All right, 4 quick ones, my final 4. You've been through this before. Just a couple of words, a sentence. You don't have to give us much, but just first thing that pops into your mind. Let's start with this. What's your favorite football uniform combo? You got a white over red over blue. I mean, you guys.
Yeah,
the fact that you claim about half a dozen colors,
I know,
makes it pretty easy for you to put together a lot of really cool uniforms. Kudos to whoever does the uniform designs because they're pretty special. So you got a favorite?
I still like the all whites or the all blues, and I think there's traditional components to that. But I also think while we still have some color options, I won't argue with that. We have kind of tried to solidify what our fonts and our marks are. So like in football, you're going to see a block Kansas. You're not going to see that Trajan, cursive type thing. Right. That doesn't fit football.
Right.
You'll see the modern bird, the happy bird on occasion, but you're going to see that Warhawk too, right? So I like that intersection where we've said, hey, let's keep the color scheme clean and let's not try and do too much, but let's make sure we're making the right statements around font and marks.
I don't even remember which one it was. There was one that I was like, yeah. But all the other ones, I think you've done a good job of that. Of being
we rolled out red.
Football uniform.
We rolled out red just the other week.
Yeah.
We did black last year. I think
that was awesome.
Black, pretty good, Curtis.
That was my favorite.
You'll see that. I have a feeling we'll see that again. We'll definitely see the red this fall for the first time. But at the end of the day, that white with the bull Kansas and that blue Royal with the bull Kansas, those are the core
good clean look.
Unis, and I think they stand the test of time.
It's a great uniform look. I agree. All right, next one. What's the best road trip for 24? You got, if people don't know, at Illinois, so Champaign.
Yeah, sure.
You don't get to go there very often.
Sure.
At West Virginia, at Tempe to take on ASU, in Manhattan, Provo for BYU, and Baylor. Where's the best road trip for Kansas fans?
I'm excited to see the mountains behind that stadium at BYU.
Okay.
I'm excited to see a big alumni base step up in Phoenix because we got a bunch of alums.
Yes, you do.
But hey, there's only one answer. It's Manhattan, Kansas, baby. That's what I'm most excited about.
It is going to be a big one. That is a huge game. Maybe the biggest one we've ever seen between these two schools. So it is cool. All right. Will you ever let the Chiefs play in Lawrence? Yeah, they got stadium things. If they need a year, you're borrowing their stadium. If need be, wherever they might end up, if they need a place to play when your stadium's done, would you let the Chiefs play in Lawrence?
We'd love it. We'd have a Taylor concert before or after, and then the Chiefs can have it as much as they need.
Okay.
Sounds good, huh?
Yeah, it does. It does. I don't think it's going to come to that, but it would be great to see. All right, and finally, I mean, we've seen it before. The Bears played in Champaign for a couple of years. The Titans played at Vanderbilt Stadium for a while, so it's happened before.
Yep.
All right, you are from Dodge City, as we mentioned. We talk about the certified Hereford beef, USDA choice certified, comes from down there in Dodge City. So I assume you understand beef. You know beef. What's your favorite cut of steak?
I know it's going to disappoint so many of my Western Kansas brethren, but I'm a filet guy.
That's okay.
I know.
It's
I didn't grow up eating fillets. I promise you that. But now I'm like, that's the default. Give me the petite fillet.
Yeah, the petite fillet. There it is. Watching your figure while taking the best cut.
Something like that.
I get it. Hey, Travis, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on everything that's going on. I know there's a lot more work, but there's a lot that's been done. And congratulations on getting that all done. And thanks for giving us some time today.
Thanks, Soren. Always good to be with you, man. Rock chalk.